Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll take a speed run through all the key business stories happening across the African continent. Wherever you're joining us from, Cairo, Nairobi, Lagos and Johannesburg, welcome. We've got plenty for you in the next 30 minutes. South Sudan makes a U-turn on its decision to expel all foreign workers. The curtains fall on the World Export Development Forum in Kigali, Rwanda. We'll be live there with the resolutions. We'll also introduce you later on to the brains behind Togo's premier low-cost computers. Let's start tonight in South Sudan. The government there now says it will not be expelling foreign workers. Instead, however, it says it will put in place laws that favor the employment of South Sudanese citizens when it comes to filling job opportunities in the country. This comes barely a day after an order was issued by the Labour Minister ordering all private companies, including NGOs, to terminate the contracts of foreign employees in the 15th of October. Now, there are thousands of foreigners from neighboring countries living and working in various sectors in South Sudan.
The policies, the labor policies that the Minister of Labor and Human Resource Development is doing is working on those labor laws where they will also share it with the different private sector organizations and other working positions in this country. That will be discussed between the Minister of Labor and Human Resource Development with regards to the laws which are found like in any other country here within the region. There are labor regulations that specify certain jobs for nationals. There are jobs that specify for non-nationals like in any other country. And those will be later on discussed with these companies.
Let's get the latest now from Kofa Mrenje, our correspondent. He's live in Juba right now with more data on this story. Kofa, it does seem quite a few officials in South Sudan have progressively distanced themselves from this September 15th order. Did pressure from South Sudan's neighbours in East Africa prompt this change in policy?
Well, Rama, the minister said clearly there that this has nothing to do with pressure from any of the East African countries, but it was just meant to address and clarify on what he calls something that has been blown out of proportion, that the government never said that they were planning to kick out foreigners from South Sudan. In fact, he says anyone out there who is willing to come and work inside South Sudan can do so. But questions have been asked on why that order made it very clear for private companies to inform their foreign employees that they should cease working from the 15th of next month. Of course, that is a question that the minister says it's something that has been blown out of proportion. But we also understand that he met some of the ambassadors from the East African countries, and some of them, expressed their discomfort, with that order. There have also been some angry reactions from the neighboring countries such as Kenya and Uganda. But as the position that the government has taken right now, the minister says this has nothing to do with pressure from the East African countries. It is an independent country that is acting according to the law. Rama?
Yes, indeed. Kofa, the Foreign Affairs Minister also said earlier today that the intent here is to boost local employment levels. With this September 15th order effectively revoked, what policy should we expect to see in order to meet that objective?
Well, here's what the minister says. He says every country, be it in the region or in the world, have policies and rules that stipulate on who can take up positions in the country, that is foreigners, and who can take up positions as locals. And that is exactly what the government here is trying to do, just trying to create employment opportunities for the qualified South Sudanese who are here. But of course, that is a question that and they say they're working with some experts from the region on employment policies, and they're trying to come up with rules which will be communicated later to private companies to streamline on who is supposed to take up positions in private companies, especially from outside the country, and who is supposed to take up those positions from here. But it is not clear as at this moment what kind of policies or rules they will come up with. Everyone now is just waiting. As he said, it is the Ministry of Labor that will communicate those rules and policies to the private companies here.
Yes, indeed. We'll have to leave it there for the time being. That's Kofam Renjel live in Juba. Now, the U-turn by Africa's youngest state has elicited various responses on our social media pages. And at play, the common thread here is the them versus us dynamic. Let's make a quick run through some of your comments. Jimo Ajitunobi, you expressed disappointment with the early expulsion in a country with, as you put it, little technology and, of course, a fairly small skilled labour base. Hajjana Humura Brian, you say that South Sudan's government is simply being ignorant. How can you replace skilled labour with those of little knowledge? They need more time to train and be skilled. Why hurry? Tiban Richard said, thumbs up for the minister. We have enough human resources to fill up all the positions in the NGOs. Why should Kenyans dominate in South Sudan? Good move, minister, you say. Boniface Wambua, you noted it would be fairly painful if other countries, especially East African states, responded with reciprocal policies. And you argue that this is not the right time for states to have such directives in place. On Twitter, again, the same us versus them dynamic very much at play. At engineer_skeleton saying, yes, 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 I will land a job or get a job rather in my land, South Sudan. Let's move on to West Africa now. Commercial activity in Sierra Leone is at its lowest level, given the outbreak of the Ebola virus in West Africa. Key sectors like tourism are plagued by the incurable disease, which is spreading at an exponential rate. Before the epidemic, Sierra Leone's economy was growing about 5% a year. FDI inflows were growing too. All of that now has virtually ground to a halt.
With tropical rainforests and palm-lined beaches, Sierra Leone was becoming increasingly popular as a holiday destination. But since the Ebola outbreak, would-be tourists are avoiding the country. Freetown's burgeoning tourism industry has taken a serious blow from the disease that has killed over 2,000 people. The World Health Organization says the outbreak might last for months, hence devastate businesses operating in the country.
It's a serious situation. It's serious to the extent that we had to lay off our staff because we cannot maintain them anymore. We cannot maintain the overheads. We cannot maintain the running costs of the business. And so we have to shut down, and we asked our staff to go.
At first, we get customers then complaints, but now we get to get better. So that's give the calls for me and cut our salaries 50%. And what time they do, every month with my salary now, I need to half for right now. I'm gonna have money they give me.
Most of we, even though they not cut down staff, but it affects we financially. The way we don't plan with self and the way we for day, we don't cut down. So we just pray that God will solve this situation out.
The Sierra Leonean tourism industry had been growing steadily since the end of a civil war in 2002, earning an estimated $41.7 million a year. It's also created employment for over 5,000 people in the country. In the face of the deadly disease, business has slowed down, airline flights suspended, and the government's weak health system is struggling to contain the outbreak. The International Monetary Fund has said economic growth in Sierra Leone is likely to fall from 8% from 11.3% this year.
We have shut down some floors because we are not occupying them, the rooms. We have shut down the meeting rooms. We have shut down some lights and some corridors and some guest areas. We have scheduled lights outside the hotel to be on only when necessary.
The government tried to halt new infections by introducing lockdowns, but that did not stop the spread of the disease, as many cases remained concealed. A medical charity operating in the country says quarantines and lockdowns may end up driving people underground and jeopardize trust between people and health providers. Jin Keo, CCTV.
Now, trade volumes between emerging economies on one hand and developing ones on the other have been rising for several years now. They are expected by some to double from their current levels over the next 15 years. In Africa alone, for example, a third of sub-Saharan non-oil exports go to Brazil, China, India and Russia. Participants at the Global Export Development Forum in Kigali, Rwanda, are confident that those trade volumes can make up 66% of global trade. The subject dominated discussion on the last day of the forum, as Peter Okaba reports from Kigali.
For many in the developing world, South-South trade is no longer an aspiration, but a reality for many emerging countries. Trade where nations trade with developing economies like them, rather than with developed nations. South-South trade is growing at a furious pace. It accounted for a quarter of world trade in the year 2012, rising to an estimated 33% in the year 2014, with projections that it will hit 66% of total global trade by the year 2030. One major reason for this growth is investment by China in Africa, especially in areas that create infrastructure necessary to support growth.
The Chinese government attaches great importance to upgrading the quality of the cooperation between China and African countries as well as the other developing countries. You see the direct investment from China to Africa has been increased largely. You see, 4 years ago, it was $1.4 billion US, and now, I'm talking about the non-financial direct investment. It was 3.5 billion US.
Stakeholders from across different regions highlight the lack of uniform African or regional standards for goods, coupled with the lack of the drive to compete at a global level and to ensure implementation of initiatives that will resolve challenges.
The critical thing for us in Africa is to deepen the integration. We have several regional trading bodies, about 9 of them in Africa. We've got ECOWAS, we've heard from West Africa, COMESA, SADC, East African Community. There is an important message here that we need to ensure that we integrate more. We need to ensure that we don't pay just lip service in terms of we're going to trade amongst ourselves. And I think if we deepen our integration and work in partnership along Africa ourselves, then that gives us an opportunity to be able to have a stronger voice when you're talking about partnership with other regions.
The competitiveness problem, like the economies of scale, where others produce 1 billion in 1 hour, we cannot produce that. We might bring 100,000. In that case, leave alone to export to other market, we cannot be competitive in our own local market.
While Africa today contains some of the fastest growing economies in the world, it accounts for a mere fraction of global trade, while most South-South trade continues to take place within Asia and Latin America, a situation everyone agrees is unsustainable. The focus then for experts and stakeholders is how African SMEs can benefit as they become suppliers to emerging South-South value chains, and how African countries can then keep more of the value add and thus improve the livelihoods of African stakeholders. Peter Okaba, CCTV, at the World Export Development Forum in Kigali, Rwanda.
Quick run through the equity markets here for you. Positive gains across the board in trading today, except for East Africa. The NSE 20 share index pairing some of the gains that we did see at 52.17 yesterday. That was the highest level we've seen so far this year. Safaricom, the most heavily traded counter on the day, it was 2.7% lower today. It's trading ex-dividend. Its rival as far as mobile money is concerned with the MVNO license, equity was also lower, down 2.8% on the day. In total, however, equity turnover was about 44% lower. When we come back, Zimbabwe and Russia commissioned a $3 billion platinum mining project. We'll have the details. And Anglo Gold backtracked on its planned emergent rights issue. We'll be digging into the meat of the matter. Live from London when we come back.
The rebasing of Nigeria's GDP has been a long time in coming.
The information provides us much more scope to know what the structure of the economy is.
15 minutes into the hour, you're still watching Global Business Africa. Now, officials from Zimbabwe and Russia have commissioned a $3 billion platinum mine, which should produce about 600,000 ounces of the precious metal every year once it is complete. The project's expected to also stimulate growth in related support sectors of the economy over the next few years and create about 5,000 jobs at a time. The mine has a projected life of about 34 years, as Penina Karibe reports.
The Zimbabwe Mining Development Corporation and a Russian consortium have entered into a joint venture, Great Dyke Investments, which is the largest joint venture that Zimbabwe has entered into with a foreign investor. The venture is expected to improve the livelihoods of people and alleviate unemployment in the area. Nearly 1 million ounces of platinum are expected to be produced annually, and the mine is expected to have a lifeline of between 20 to 34 years. The Dawendale Platinum Project coincides with the holding of the first session of the Zimbabwe-Russia Joint Permanent Commission on Economic, Technical and Trade Cooperation. The venture shows the viability of Zimbabwe and Africa as investment hubs. It also reflects on the Russia-Zimbabwe relations that have stretched over decades from pre-independence times. The launch of the project marked the fruition of a vision that started in 2006 and has the potential to contribute significantly to the socio-economic landscape of Zimbabwe.
What is important these days is to recognize the pluralism in the international community, the emergence of new big players, including the African continent, whose interests and whose voice must be taken into account in the world politics.
The launch of the project marked the fruition of a vision that started in 2006 and has the potential to contribute significantly to the socio-economic landscape of Zimbabwe.
Additional benefits will be realized in service sectors such as technological transfer and skill development, education, health, as well as the development of local infrastructure.
During the commissioning of the project, the two governments also signed an intergovernmental agreement on cooperation in the implementation of the project and a financing agreement for the Dawendale project. Investment levels are expected to reach $4.2 billion over the next 10 years, and there are plans to set up a refinery to promote value addition, which is a key pillar of Zimbabwe's economic blueprint, the Zimbabwe Agenda for Sustainable Socio-Economic Transformation, or ZIM-ASSET. Penina Karibe, CCTV.
Now, U-turns do seem to be a bit of a thing in this particular bulletin. Let's focus on another one. AngloGold Ashanti. It scrapped a planned demerger separating its South African from non-South African assets and a $2.1 billion rights issue earlier this week after shareholder revolt against that plan, which was announced just days ago. Now, management may now have to sell assets in order to cut debt. The South African-based gold producer unveiled its plans to split its assets and list its international ones in London. That mirrored moves by other gold producers like Gold Fields to reduce exposure in a country plagued by rising labour costs and policy instability. Now, shareholders and analysts alike said splitting AngloGold's domestic operations from the rest made sense given South Africa's tarnished reputation, if you will, as a destination for mining investment. But the size of the rights issue is just too big, and the equity dilution levels for some were unacceptable. Let's dig into this a little more with Miriam Bemard. She joins us now live from London tonight with more details on this story. Miriam, what exactly were the main objections that shareholders had to this asset split and rights issue plan, and how they reacted to both ideas being dropped?
Well, Rama, the big issue for shareholders was how the equity capital would be raised so the restructuring could actually happen without wiping out already existing capital, hindering on, of course, future prospects and profits. Now, splitting the company into an international and local business would mean a holding company discount, an equity offering that would essentially wipe out shareholder value. And that's how investors were looking at it. Billionaire fund manager John Paulson was a key player in forcing AngloGold to pull the plug. Rather than a clean demerging of the company's international assets from its troubled South Africa assets, the deal came with the creation of a new company, Rama, and what many analysts see as a value-destructive $2 billion rights issue.
Indeed, with about $3 billion or so in net debt, that's fairly high. What assets can AngloGold Ashanti put up for sale in order to cut that down?
Well, you know, analysts that I spoke with have recommended and have said that they support the miner possibly selling its share in the Kibali mine in the Democratic Republic of Congo to its venture partner and rival Randgold Resources. That's one option. The idea was actually for the miner to reduce its debt load by separating and really simplifying its business and allowing the management teams of the two companies to be more economically competitive. And experts that I spoke with agree that separate listings could have likely allowed the two companies to be better valued by investors, but without a clear idea of how the company will now move forward, investors are concerned how the miner will reduce its debt. We need to see more options.
Indeed. More data, more data, more data. We'll have to look for that. We'll leave it there for the time being. That's Miriam Bemad live in London. Now let's take you back to Kigali. Earlier on, of course, we spoke about South-South trade and how that, of course, can be leveraged by small and medium-sized enterprises right across Africa, which are the majority employers across the entire continent, to create more jobs, boost their turnover, and, of course, move up higher the value chain. Peter Okaba has been covering that conference for the last 2 days. He joins us now live from the Rwandese capital. Peter, growing south-to-south services in services was a key focus today, but isn't the lack of skilled manpower, which you hear CEOs moaning about across sub-Saharan Africa, a key limiter to growing more services, more trade in services?
Well, Rama, the answer to your question is both yes and no. Yes, in the sense that there is indeed a dearth of talent right across the African continent and in many regions where this type of trade is supposed to be well encouraged. And no, because most of the companies that were in focus here are SMEs, really mom and pop kind of companies that are really small and looking to grow. Not really companies that are in the business of employing people to be able to do lots of things for them in the skilled arenas. However, the growth of that sort of talent right across the regions has been in focus, because as these companies continue to scale up, then these sort of skills do come into question. And then, of course, the dearth of talent that we have just talked about comes into sharp focus. Rama.
Yes, indeed. One last question for you, Peter. Was there a focus at this conference on cutting the tax burden that SMEs face right across sub-Saharan Africa as one way perhaps of boosting their growth and, more importantly, their survival rates?
Well, the call here has been to look at the support of this kind of companies holistically, so to say, with the tax burden being just one aspect of the entire equation. And this is entirely because something called a sunset clause is supposed to come in for many companies, such that you do enjoy a tax holiday for a season and then scale up into what normal companies are paying. However, for many companies, it has been found that taxes are just one aspect of that equation. And other things like access to markets, logistics, the lack of skills maybe with things like accounting and that sort of thing are what is really the challenge. And growing such skills and growing such areas for companies in order for them to be able to take up opportunities that are there is what comes into focus. And many governments being asked to help grow things like, well, for companies like here in Rwanda, access to export arenas, mainly things like ICT, and how they will be able to market in other arenas, especially because they have been enjoying markets within Rwanda, but not really enjoying them internationally. Rama.
Yes, indeed. We'll have to leave there for the time being. That's Peter Okaba in the Rwandese capital of Kigali, one of the cleanest cities across Africa. Quick run through commodities here now for you. With regards to Nigeria and its oil industry specifically, the Nigerian Oil Petroleum Corporation rather has some of its workers on strike. Now, so far exports have not been affected, but we're keeping a close eye on this particular story. If there are any developments in it, we'll certainly keep you up to date on what's going on over there. When we return, we'll be introducing you to the very young brains behind Togo's low-cost computers. It's a fairly interesting story, this. Stick around. We'll see you in 30 seconds. Welcome back. 22-year-old Sam Kodo is the very first entrepreneur to develop and assemble low-cost computers in Togo. Now, the little PCs he's putting together can be linked to a variety of devices, both input and output, and partly due to the design, they enjoy a significant price advantage.
Togolese Sam Kodo is the founder of LCCOM, short for low-cost computer Infinite Loop. The company produces low-cost personal computers for local students. The small computers can fit into a pocket and by plugging into TVs or touch screens can turn into internet-enabled desktop computers.
My latest invention is a small computer called a Livebook PC. A Livebook PC is a small computer which one we can even though plug it in the pockets. It can be worked on TV screen or any screen, and it can use battery to work. It's very small and low price, low costs.
The computers are sold for a fraction of the price of other PCs on the market and cost about half the amount to assemble. The company employs 6 people and has sold over 40 computers in Togo since February.
In Africa, we noticed that the technology is not very developed, and I want to be a source of inspiration of the young African, the young Togolese, and to be as an icon of the technology in Africa and to help my community to be developed with my projects.
Kodo created his first robot at the age of 8, and by 19 he caught the attention of the international media. His robots could interact with humans, recognize faces and objects, speak, execute orders and even play football. A few years ago, Kodo also created his first smartphone.
I have started the conception of the robot at the age of 7 years old, and when I was in my childhood, I used to read science book and technology book, and I noticed that I was able to reproduce what I saw on this book, and I created my first robot, my first pipette robot who can walk, avoid obstacles at this age, and it's beginning like that.
Kodo hopes young African techpreneurs can follow in his footsteps and become innovative. The continent imports most of its gadgets from abroad, but experts say with training and funding, Africa can become the next Silicon Valley. Mahemutwa, CCTV.
Quick run through the currencies for you before we tell you what we have in the kitchen for you tomorrow. The rand, of course, breaking 2 straight days of gains today. It did fall down about 0.4% from Tuesday's close. The Fed policy statement, which has just come out in the last couple of minutes, will definitely give some direction on that in trading tomorrow. Keep a close eye on that. The Kenyan shilling at around 3-year lows. 89.2535 is your number for today, weaker than Tuesday's close. The fact of the matter is the central bank's aggressive liquidity mop-up operations really aren't having an effect on the support that is necessary for the Kenyan shilling. So there's a bias for it to weaken moving forward. Now, later on tomorrow, here's what we have lined up. An International Monetary Fund mission is in Ghana. They're assessing the country's eligibility for support for its currency, of course. The country's cedi has taken a beating from the US dollar. The economy is in urgent need of a shot in the arm. We'll have the details from Accra later on tomorrow. We'll also be looking at an initiative in South Africa, where women in the townships have not just grown to become their own bosses, but are contributing to fashion and modern-day trends as well. We'll be looking at both those businesses and plenty more in detail, but that's it for this edition of the program. Do remember, you can send your feedback to Global Business Africa at cctv.com, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you're online, so are we. If you missed this program, of course, catch it on YouTube as well. But thank you for watching. We'll see you in 23 hours. I'm Raman Yak.